Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hope you're doing well. We are continuing our reading of St. Augustine's Confessions. I really enjoy it because it makes one learn how to be more introspective, and I feel like that's very beneficial in life. And he's a classic that has been around for a long time, and philosophers today still discuss him. And usually, when you take a Philosophy 101 class, you'll get a little brief overview of who he is, and I like seeing how he views the world. Okay? So let us continue upon that path. Alright, we are in Book 3, paragraph number... Wait, let's see. Oh, yes. Yes. Paragraph number 8. Right. But how can sins of vice be against you, since you cannot be marred by perversion? How can sins of violence be against you, since nothing can injure you? Your punishments are for the sins which men commit against themselves. Because although they sin against you, they do wrong to their own souls, and their malice is self-betrayed. So here, we would say as a Muslim, Allah is the Most High. Nothing can hinder Allah. And when we harm ourselves, we only do it against ourselves. So when he says, your punishments are for the sins which men commit against themselves is also something we as Muslims would agree with. That we only harm ourselves. Allah is free of need, high above his heat. However, their phrasing is a tad bit different, isn't it? Because although they sin against you, they do wrong to their own souls, and their malice is self-betrayed. They corrupt and pervert their own nature. Now this is a cool insight right here. So when someone says, well, what does sinning do? If you're arguing from an Augustinian perspective, you would say that you are perverting your own nature and you're corrupting it. So if someone says, well, what's the big deal about sinning? You would simply say, well, you're corrupting yourself. And that's not going to be for your strength and honor, is it? You're hurting yourself. Which you made and for which you shaped the rules, either by making wrong use of things, which you allow. That's a good point. Using something for the wrong things even though it's allowed. Very interesting point. I think you could drum up a lot of examples in your mind, and that would be a good mental exercise. Or by becoming inflamed with passion to make unnatural use of things which you do not allow. So, inflamed with passion to make unnatural use of things. Really just letting your lust and your hormones and your urges run amok, sounds like. Or else their guilt consists in raving against you in their hearts and with their tongues, and kicking against the good. Kicking against the goad. Okay. Or in playing havoc with the restrictions of human society, and brazenly exulting in private feuds and factions, each according to his fantasies or his fads. His fancies are fads, fantasies. Now, brazenly exulting is a very unique phrase that can be added to our vocabulary. And then he continues on a little bit further. This is what happens, O fountain of life, when we abandon you, who are the one true creator of all that ever was or is. So he calls God the fountain of life. And each of us proudly sets his heart on one part of your creation, instead of on the whole. So it is by the path of meekness and devotion that we must return to you. So, meekness and devotion, that's how he argues you can return back to God. Okay. You rid us of our evil habits and forgive our sins when we confess to you. You listen to the groans of the prisoners and free us from the chains which we have forged for ourselves. Now here you have another example. Chains you have formed against yourselves. So when they talked about how you perverted and corrupted your own nature and you've harmed yourself, and that you're corrupting yourself, well, now we see another example of someone forging their own chains. They did not practice self-control. It came just one link upon one link upon one link, and before you know it, you're all bound up in that nonsense. This is very apt. This you do for us unless we toss our heads against you in the illusion of liberty, and in our greed for gain, at the risk of losing all. Love our own good better than you yourself, who are common good of all. So, I found this part unique, that one part of the creation instead of the whole. Maybe becoming too myopic in view, too myopic in life, only hyper focusing on one thing and then not realizing how you can branch out and like a holistic approach, maybe. It's very unique. Now there was another part I highlighted in book 3, paragraph number 9. Sometimes we also do things which have every appearance of being sins against nature, or against our fellow men, but are not sins because they offend neither you, the Lord, our God, nor the community in which we live. For example, a man may amass a store of goods to meet the needs of life. So here, this is interesting. So amass a store of goods. There's a difference between being a prepper and being a hoarder. My great-grandma, who's still alive, she's a hoarder. She has a very big problem of hoarding, and she's in her 90s. She has an entire house that she has hoarded. Bought stuff on those old infomercials, and it's filled to the brim with debris and nonsense and junk, and it's unlivable. Okay? She can't even go in there. An entire house wasted, and she sleeps on my grandma's couch. And she has started hoarding in my grandpa's garage. And he's told her to throw the stuff out, and she won't do it, and she's a hoarder. She has a compulsive habit to hoard. That's quite different than someone saying, we're going to have extra bags of rice. You know, you need to have stored goods because you're preparing for the winter, economic downturns, depression in the markets, natural disaster types of situations, and you have a farm and you want to, preserve stuff. So like you have 7 pounds of apricots from your tree, dry some, can some, pickle some, you name it, create some jellies. That's quite different than having a good pantry, ain't it? That you have for your family. You can share, it don't make you bad, right? But the hoarding is quite different. And that can look like a sin to some, but there's a difference if you're utilizing it versus just consuming it and then letting it rot. One of my grandma's dearest friends, Linda, who died, she was a hoarder, and I mean, her bathroom just had, like, you would see, how many bottles of conditioners. It's hard to explain everything you see from a hoarder, but a lot of the stuff on the late night commercials I've seen on TV, like stuff they buy and it just piles up everywhere. And when I would sleep over there, I'd sleep on the couch, you'd be surrounded by stuff. I mean, stacked to the wall. And that leads to a lot of spiders and bugs. Her kitchen had tons of cans of food, but I wouldn't eat too much over there because you don't know what's expired and what's not. And I really avoided it. She had an awesome anarchy tomato garden though, which was cool. But she was a massive hoarder. She also hoarded alcohol. She had tons of bottles of alcohol. tequila rose. I mean, she got just anything you can think of. She just got it. She always did give me nice gifts though, with like baskets of bars of soap and hair oils and stuff. That was very sweet. But she had a problem. She had a big problem. I think people like that buy things because they're very lonely. Her mom was blind and in a bed, hospital type bed in her living room. And Linda had no teeth, and she would take care of her blind mom who was in the living room. And she had some chihuahuas, and she lived in not a too impressive part of town. And we would visit her. It was my grandma's dearest friend. She died. But yeah, that's an interesting thing is when you examine hoarders. She did share her products, but she would buy so much that it would end up going to waste. Right? So when he talks about amassing a store of good to meet the needs of life, I really resonate with that because I would want to have a supply, and you want to have enough food to where if the government tries to oppress you with another lockdown, you won't starve, right? Food is essential to freedom so that the government cannot starve you. Once a population becomes starved, they become desperate, and whoever controls the food can control you. No parent wants to watch their kid starve. So if you're free and you have a farm and you have resources and means to amass some type of food, you are very free. If the masses don't come and rob you. Like during, what was it, South Africa? I don't remember. But there was some riots. Oh, I posted about it a while ago. But I saw them raid a farmer's land. They took his chickens, his goats. And then within a couple days, all those people who destroyed their own businesses through riots were standing up waiting for free food. Because they destroyed their own community because they were emotionally outraged. And they burnt everything and they were stealing stuff and from the stores. The stores all went out of business. I mean, they killed their own economy. And they hoarded a bunch of stuff they didn't really need. And so the people there didn't have Second Amendment rights, they didn't have gun rights, so they were not able to use lethal force against hordes of criminals. And so in a situation like that, you'd have to hide your storage food and be very careful. You'd have to watch out because people can steal all your stuff and then you'll starve. So you have to have a way of protecting your property. You know, don't let your kids starve because a mob of morons decided to ruin their area. So this particular sentence here is very enlightening, I'd argue. Or some contingency, but it does not necessarily follow that he is a miser. Exactly. You're not a miser just because you have some resources stored up. A miser is somebody who really penny pinches. Is a really Scrooge McDuck type of individual. And they exist, right? That's why you can't hate every rich person. You know, it's not their job to fund your lifestyle. It's your job to figure out your life. Or he may be punished by those whose duty it is to correct misdemeanors. But it is by no means certain that they do it out of wanton cruelty. Exactly. That's a good point. So if someone has to correct a misdemeanor, an infraction, it doesn't mean that they are sadomasochists. Somebody got to do it, just like the executioner job. Many of the things we do may therefore seem wrong to men, but are approved in the light of your knowledge. And many, which men applaud, are condemned in your eyes. This is because the appearance of what we do is often different from the intention with which we do it. This is true. In Islam, we have to say, you know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows your intentions. He is going to judge you according to your intention. And then we also say, like, we have to judge by what is apparent. We can't have too much suspicion. But we try to figure out what's the intention of this individual when they have committed something, you know, like a big mistake. because that does matter. Some people don't realize what they did until they're like, oh, oops, that wasn't my intention. But some people deliberately have a devious intention, and that's what you gotta watch out for. So Allah knows what's in the chest, and He knows what we do, and what we conceal, and all that, right? But we also have to make sure, like, really measure out what's happening here with due justice. Not being overly suspicious, but not being overly naive, I'd argue. And the circumstance at the time may not be clear. Yeah, if you don't, you gotta know the circumstances. And then there was a sentence here that I liked that said, "For all that your servants do is done as an example of what is needed for the present or as a sign of what is yet to come." Very enlightening section, I must say. I truly enjoy St. Augustine's works because he really makes you think in ways you didn't expect, and you can learn something from so many types of people. And so hopefully you learn something from this section. He named God by the fountain of life. Found that to be unique. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has 99 names. So it's fascinating when we see the Christians having their own names for God, but also having just common language uses of that as well. And so, very interesting. We definitely learned a lot. And how sins corrupt and pervert your nature. That's why you should avoid them. Let me know what you think. By the way, if you'd like to join my blog, it's www.subscribestar.com/MilhanArchive. Hope to see you there.